Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu einer weiteren Folge Chäos Noah. Und ja, wir sind ja gerade kurz davor, das Schwert zu ergreifen und bei uns hat wieder die nächste Delusion reingekickt von Seraton. Wir sehen, was jetzt passiert und ob wir Nanami retten können. But Nanami. Boah, ey, das ist schon echt hart eigentlich. The Tragic Big Brother. What the heck? Alter.
日本中が泣いたとか白々しいキャッチコピーがつけられて、それに載せられたバカでゆとりな人たちからの感動した、共感したっていう絶賛の嵐。
What the heck?
それで印税もガッポガッポ。半年後に映画が決定っしょ。すごいよ。ナナミッチをここで見殺しにするだけでタッキーにはバラ色の人生が待ってるんだ。
Alter, ey, das ist echt... Nee, das geht nicht.
さあ、どっちを選ぶ？タッキーがここで頑張って、でも死んで全てが無になるか。バラ色の人生か。
Ach du Scheiße. Der ist immer noch das Schwert.
痛いのは嫌だ。死ぬのは嫌だ。消えるのは嫌だ。何がどうなろうと、僕は痛くも痒くもない。
I muttered all of that to myself. That was my way of trying to make it sound convincing. The one I should trust. It wasn't Shogun, it was Seraton.
あの剣に見えるだけで剣じゃない。ただの光の反射とか目の錯覚だ。
そうだよ。さあ、帰ろう。帰ったらさ、私のパンツ見ながらいっぱいエッチなこと想像していいから。
僕帰る。帰ってセーラちゃんでハーハーするよ。
嬉しい
Okay.
な。タッキーのためにエッチなポーズたくさんしてあげるね。
Das war's doch jetzt nicht, oder? I slowly withdrew my outstretched hand. That alone made me feel much more at ease. I took Seraton out of my chest pocket and gazed at her smile. As long as I had her forgiveness, I didn't need anything else. I sniffed something up in the snot that had been dripping from my nose. I then turned around and started walking towards...
クエストはまだクリアしていないぞ。
僕は勇者なんかじゃない。妹一人救えないようなヘタレな妹だよ。僕に期待しないで、僕を見ないで、僕をそっとしておいて。
ではナナミちゃんは殺すことにするよ。
どうせもう死んでる。
She was already dead. Nami had been brutally murdered by Shogun. Everyone would report on it starting tomorrow, treating it as the 6th new gen incident. It saddened me, but there was nothing I could do about it. Er hört the sound of dripping water. No, it wasn't water. Aber es ist wieder verschwommen. Das heißt, er stellt sich das gerade vor. Dark red blood dripped from the wrist of her hand and... Aber jetzt ist es getan.
最低。
よくもよくもよくもよくもよくも
Okay. The world turned crimson. My anger, my sadness, and my shame were ripping my head apart. My thoughts were chaotic mess. Without any rhyme or reason, I charged towards Shogun. I made to grab him with his hiding place in the shadows, but I didn't get the physical response I had expected. I collapsed along with the Reacher. It must have hurt my elbow as pain was shooting through it. Ich bin gerade irritiert. Who should have been on my feet. I had tumbled across the ground. Terrified, I slowly reached out my... was extremely rather than freshly, it was very clear. A helmet. A pitch black helmet.
That's a spider.
What the heck? Okay, ich bin gerade etwas verwirrt. Ich mach mal das. Den speichere ich mal, dann... ich bin mir gerade nicht sicher, hätte ich das Schwert... Ich muss das hier wieder nochmal machen, weil ich jetzt... Ich möchte jetzt einmal kurz... Hallo, kann ich hier bitte schnell überspringen, das Ganze? Ich möchte nämlich...
見つけたんだね。では、手を深く考えな。君にならできる。
できるわけない。ダメ、タッキー。そんなことしたら下に
切り取るなんて。
固定観念、最初からでき、常識を捨て、君には力。あの花壇みたいにね。
そんなに都合よ。将軍があっさり。だって相手は10人も。あいつは忘れたの？将軍は5人の男女を1回も触れることなく転落死させたんだよ。
だってあれは本当の剣じゃないんだよ。
それならもっと手を伸ばせばいい。もっと。どうしたの？でないといつまで経っても。君はあまりご君のわがままに理想道と君の妹ただそれだけ。
死にたくない。
Komm, überspring alles. Komm, alles überspringen.
手が届かない。
その剣を
手を
ななみちゃんを
助けて。
昼間のことを君は
自信ある？
Ich bin mir gerade nicht sicher, ob ich das Schwert bekommen konnte hier oder nicht. Komm. So, dann mache ich den hier einfach lieber nochmal. Sicher, damit ich hier den Save Point habe. So, und dann schaue ich mal, ob ich hier... Was passiert da eben? Bevor hatte ich ja den grünen genommen. Na.
ここでタッキーが頑張って助けたってお兄のせいでこんな目にあったんだからねバカ
Okay, sie wurden eben verhängnismäßig. Patient ordeno meta Narios some fidelity, das ist der Tim.
タッキー自分のことだけど私はさこうしてずっとタッキーの脳内で二人きりでお話し続けたいのよ、
死にたく痛いのは死ぬの消えるのは嫌なんだ。どうなろうとあの剣に見えるだけで。
そうだよ。
Okay, da bin ich da jetzt schon wieder.
タッキーのためにエッチなポーズたくさんしてあげるね。
誰が動いてクエストは
僕は妹一人僕に来た僕を見ない僕を
ではナナミちゃん
どうせもう死んでる
Okay, das ist wieder dasselbe. Gut. Dann schaue ich mal, was passiert, wenn ich rot mache.
今まで一度も自分で意識してその力とかってのを使ったことないっしょ
Das wäre dann das erste Mal, dass ich rot mache.
ねえ逃げでもこれ以上死にたくないっしょ
Ob ich jetzt das Schwert ergreife oder nicht?
じゃあはっきりナナミッチが死んだっていいじゃんタッキーは自分の命よりナナミッチの命の方がでも突き詰めれば他人死んだら悲しタッキーに何か害が及ぶ自分の命と他人死んだらさ世界がタッキーにとっての世界が終わるの死後の世界なんてないでただタッキーつまりさタッキーが死んだらタッキーがみんな消えるでもナナミッチブラチューの最終回ねえ死にたい死にたくない
Okay, ich glaube, ich nehme meinen ersten Save.
痛いのは嫌だ死に消えるのは嫌なんだどうなろうとあの剣に見えるだけで剣じゃないただの光の反射とか目の錯覚だ
そうだよ帰
って
嬉しいなタッキーのためにエッチなポーズたくさんしてあげるね
Okay. Ändert nichts, dann bin ich auf dem Strang hier richtig. Despite midnight, quickly approaching the ticket gates of the subway, Hansamon line were still filled to the brim with people. The earthquake had violently disrupted the public transportation schedules, and no one was even attempting to hide their frustration as they passed through this ticket gate. Employing a sidelong glance, Ben Yasui inspected the monitor resting in the station attending booth. The station staff had received our call yesterday during their morning operations. The call had reports that a high school girl wielding a gigantic bladed weapon was going on rampage in the area. The police had been dispatched in response to this, but upon arriving at the scene they found no traces of the girl, nor the man who had supposedly been attacked. The man who had happened to overhear the story earlier today was very interested in the appearance of the male victim. The fact that there had been several similar incidents had also caught his attention. This was why Ben was making an appearance here at such an hour. According to his sources, the incident had been captured in full of one of the surveillance cameras. When Ben asked the station attendant to show him the video, they willingly agreed, but one of the detectives said the video was a little creepy. Noting this, Ben elected to have them show him the video. The video was full of static. Maybe it's from the earthquake, Ben thought to himself. There had been various reports about the earthquake causing citizens to lose hard disk data, leaving Ben to wonder whether it was related. And it would be difficult to identify anyone in the recording as they were just barely visible. The recording featured a single man. He was standing by the wall in the far right-hand corner of the screen. The wall was located slightly far from the ticket gates, meaning passengers would not travel past it very often as they were changing trains. Incidentally, a few other passengers that had just crossed in front of the camera. The man's appearance was hard to make out due to the fierce static, but he was fairly short and thin, and then he was carrying a large rucksack. Was könnte wohl passieren? Ein Typ mit einem großen Rucksack und eine Highschool-Schülerin, die auch mal mit einem überdimensionierten Schwert Leute in Anführungszeichen attackiert. Was könnte wohl passieren? What exactly he was doing, Ben could not say. After about an hour or so had passed in the video, a small change occurred. A few people commuting to work were walking in the direction of the man, and since they swiftly stopped to Ben, it looked like as they had been drawn to the man with the rucksack. What was truly strange, however, was that they did not even speak to him. They simply stood there in a daze. The people who had stopped did not seem to be acquaintances of the man. They were of different ages, sexes, statures, There was absolutely nothing they all shared, but what in blazes is going on. Staring at the monitor, Ben tilted his head to the side, and as he did so, a lone girl entered the frame. She had long hair and she was wearing a uniform from Sumei Academy. The girl headed straight for the man with the rucksack in a manner that could only be described as exuding nothing but pure, unadulterated confidence. Her movements were entirely unlike those who had stopped before. Instead of halting, the girl pushed aside the people gathered there and seized the man by his collar. For a short period of time, the two of them argued about something. Rather than an argument, however, it was far closer to the girl simply screaming at the man without giving him room for air. At least that was how it appeared. A few of the people who had stopped seemed to return to their senses and promptly left the scene. Eventually, the girl thrust the man away from her. The girl took a step back from the man who had fallen on his rear, then assumed a strange pose. She lowered her hips and brought both fists next to her ears. The girl looked as if she was holding something, but there was nothing in her hands. According to the report, the girl had been wielding a large blade, but where on earth could she be hiding such a thing? The answer to that soon became apparent. Suddenly, the camera shook. It was not static. The wrestling... Oh, das Bild sieht schon verdammt geil aus. The rustling hair and clothes of the passersby made it clear the surveillance camera itself was shaking. Ben gawked at the screen. He had no idea where she had retrieved it from, but the next thing he knew, the girl was holding a gigantic sword in her hand, one that was longer than she was tall. Ben asked for the tape to be rewound, just so he could confirm what he had seen. But no matter what angle he examined it from, the sword appeared to have been conjured out of thin air. Ist ja auch so der Fall. The girl had not moved a single muscle. She had remained in her hunched position in the entire time. This much was undeniable. The people in the video went into a panic when faced with the sudden appearance of the sword, but the girl did not seem to care about the people around her. The man with the rucksack, however, was very clearly terrified. He tried desperately to scramble to his feet and run away, but the girl would not allow that. With incredibly agile movement, she pursued the fleeing man and swung her gigantic sword as if it was as light as a feather. In a manner akin to a violent windstorm, the sword tore the man's rucksack to pieces. The impact was so strong the man immediately collapsed to the ground. Despite this, he appeared uninjured. In fact, when the police officers had arrived on the scene immediately after receiving the call, they had not found even a single trace of blood. Der Blick, sie ist so pissed. Then as if the girl had heard Ben's murmuring something that should have been impossible considering it was a recording, she suddenly turned towards the camera. The screen ever so slightly distorted. And the girl's figure disappeared in an instant. It was as if she had never been there to begin with. The man's shredded rucksack had been left behind, and the remnants of it were proof that the girl had been there. It was hard to tell because of the static, but it was clear that the girl had disappeared from the screen in less than a second. Ben rewound the tape again. There was nothing that seemed unnatural about the time displayed in the lower right hand corner of the screen. In other words, the footage had not been edited. But if that were true, how could Ben explain the girl and the sword? Ben, feeling as though he hadn't seen a ghost, could do nothing more than remain completely and utterly puzzled. A world of complete and utter white. And I was lying right in the center of it all. It felt as if I were floating, but I didn't know whether or not I actually was. I couldn't figure out what direction I was facing, not up nor down, not left nor right. The silence was deafening. It felt as if there were hundreds of insects buzzing around in my head at once. If someone were to tell me that this was the afterlife, I couldn't see myself contesting it. That was how monotonous, simplistic, tranquil, orderly, immaculate, empty, and peace where the word was. Perhaps this was what the mind of Buddha was like upon reaching enlightenment. It was so incredibly different from my own world. I wanted to stay here forever. The irritation that came with reality, the loneliness, the pain, the suffering, I didn't want to face any of it anymore. As my thoughts began to cascade, I heard a noise burst into the white world that had previously been silent. The sound of a door being opened, and the sound of someone's footsteps getting closer and closer.
鬼来たよ。一緒一緒。お兄お兄、今日ね、ママね、いいもの持ってきたんだよ。はい、これプレゼント。
Oh, von der Stimme her, ich würde sagen, Nanami, oh.
手編みの帽子なんだよ。すごいでしょすごいでしょ。
Oh.
もう冬だしね。ママね、帽子好きだから編んだの。使ってね。お兄、無視しないでよ。ああ、ご飯残してるじゃん。せっかくのカレーなのに。ちゃんと食べないとダメなんだよ。ねえねえ、病院のご飯って美味しくないって本当？でも食べないとダメ。起きろ、お兄。食べずに寝たら夜になってお腹空いちゃうんだから。
Someone's hand made its way under my back and forcibly shook my body awake. That was when I first realized that my eyes had been closed. Oh, it's cute. It's adorable. When I opened my eyes, a little girl was standing there. It was Nanami, my little sister, but she was awfully little. It was Nanami from a long time ago, but how long ago, I wondered. She must have been at least in elementary school. The younger Nanami scooped up some curry with a plastic spoon, then offered it to me. And I slapped the hand holding the spoon. Oh. Even after all this time, I still didn't know what had been going through my head, but in that moment I had knocked away the tray of curry and rice with my hand and seen it crashing to the floor. Oh.
お兄、お行儀悪いんだ。お母さんに言いつけてやるぞ。
Nanami crouched down to the floor and picked up the tray I had cast aside. She then retrieved a washcloth from the sink in the corner of the room and began cleaning up the mess I'd made.
世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと何にもできないんだから。
That's enough. I covered my face with my hands and slowly closed my eyes.
ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。
Warte mal, war das eben Remy? I slowly opened my eyes and saw a white ceiling. It was so bright it nearly blinded me. I blinked my eyes a few times. I tried to move my fingertips. I rested my hand in front of my face. The palm of my hand created a shadow. At last I was free from the blinding glare. I had been dreaming about Nanami ever since I could remember she had an especially strong will. After the bus accident back in elementary school, I had stopped talking to anyone and everyone, but even so, that part of Nanami only became stronger and stronger. Unlike my parents, who were simply overprotective and nothing else, she had taken care of me all while remaining strict and firm. But that dream. Had I ever been hospitalized before? I had gone in for checkups, sure, but, well, it was just a dream, so there was no real reason to take it nor the contradiction seriously. I was lying on a bed. It was a white bed with a pipe frame. The sheets were white, the pillows were white, the linoleum floor was white, the wallpaper was white, the fluorescent lights on the ceiling were white, the curtains covering the windows were white. The small shelf next to the bed was white, the ceramic paper was white, the paper cups were white. Alter, I was starting to get fed up with all the white. Ja, ich auch. Mustering up my reserve, I attempted to sit up. For a split second, I felt a numbing pain yacht through the area around my waist, but it went away just as suddenly as it had appeared. The room was fairly large. at least twice the size of my base. But what really bothered me was how incredibly dreary it was. Maybe it was a hospital room. There was a pair of green slippers lined up right beneath the bed. I was relieved to find a cool color other than white. My body was moving just fine, and it didn't seem like I was dead either. I was thirsty. I wanted a cola, an ice-cold carbonated cola. But there was no way I'd be able to find something like that in this pure white room, so I was forced to pour water directly from the pitcher into my mouth. It was a bit lukewarm, but it was enough to satisfy my thirst. Upon finishing the water, I took a breath. The door then opened, and a nurse wearing white scrubs came into the room. That was enough for me to confirm that I was in a hospital after all. Upon seeing me, her eyes grew slightly wide. She must have thought I would still be asleep.
あら、西条さん、目が覚めたんですね。
Facing me, she gave me a gentle smile, the mark of a true nurse. But something told me I had seen this person before. Oh, I remember her now. She was the girl. She was the Grill. Das ist wahrscheinlich irgendwie in Buchstaben vertauscht. Who had been in at the hospital when I'd gone to see Dr. Takashina a while back. What had she said her name was? I couldn't remember, so I stole a glance at the name tag on her chest. Hazuki was written on it. White red Hazuki-san.
お体の調子はどうですか?
Hazuki-san held out a thermometer to me, so naturally I couldn't help but take it.
体温を測ってくださいね。
With how nicely she had asked me, I had no choice but to comply. My head was overrun with question marks. But I put the thermometer inside my armpit nonetheless. Immediately after I did so, a memory burst into life inside my head. I remembered what happened. Back then, I had given up on saving Nanami. I had grabbed onto Shogun's wheelchair, but there had been no response. It had collapsed in a heap, and when I looked again, all I had been holding was Darth Spider's helmet. Count Darth Spider, the very embodiment of evil in Spark Wars. His black-clad appearance was famous even in Japan, but I would have never thought that Shogun would cosplay as him, so my anger had been overridden by raw confusion. After that, I had stood up and looked at the wheelchair, but there had been no one in it. Only a black hood draped over the back of it. That was another part of Darth Spider's costume. I had then examined my surroundings one more time, but there had been no one there. I had been the only one on that pitch-black rooftop. Suddenly the press then came flooding in all at once. That surrounded me, lights, cameras, and microphones. I had no room to breathe. There had been more than 10 of them in total. I had been so overwhelmed by it all, my terror simply grew and grew. I had wanted to run away, but I couldn't move a muscle. I had been a total mess.
結局、ニュージェネの犯人は誰なのかわからないということですか?
そのダーススパイダーのヘルメットはアメリカホームレスと関係あるのかな。日常さん、答えてくれませんか。これで終わりなんて言うなら電波ジャックですよ。
結局何がしたかったんです？ニュージェネに便乗した売人行為ですか？不謹慎だと思わないんですか？
ユーリ・ブライトマンさんとは最近話したかな。どんなこと話した？地震とニュージェネについて何か関係あると思いますか？
その手に持っている美少女フィギュアは何らかの儀式的なアイテムと考えていいんですか？
このような行動を取ったことにはアニメやゲームの影響はあったのかな。日常さん、
日常さん、
日常君。
The lightning pointed at me had been incredibly hot. I felt as my skin was being signed by the sun and doing the hottest part of the summer. The flood of people from the media made me feel lightheaded. My field of view had been spinning around in circles. I had been cornered. I had been panicking. I had been unable to breathe. I had grasped my head. I can't see anything. I don't want to see anything. I can't hear anything. I don't want to hear anything. I can't feel anything. I don't want to feel anything. Also wer ist im Moment 1 gegen like a computer that has such a code that my constant set severe. Und ich würde sagen, an dem Punkt beende ich dann auch mal diese Folge. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao.